Nigeria is considered by many to be the most popular country in Africa. Its history is filled with many kingdoms and empires. Some of us in the diaspora have significant amounts of ancestry from this region, especially Yoruba ancestry. Despite this, many of us don't know much about the most successful Yoruba state, known as Oyo. Today, I wanted to speak about this Yoruba kingdom and the complex history behind one of its rulers. What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and supporting this content. If you'd like access to full courses and sources, or you simply want to show your support, you may do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below. I'll be taking an approach that highlights the success and failures of one Oyo ruler, an approach that is centered on the perspectives of Afro-descended people outside of Africa. Ironically, oral history maintains that this ruler gave much peace and prosperity during his reign. However, some of his decisions had dire consequences for the diaspora and even some members of his own lineage. It's a strange dichotomy, but it's important for us in the diaspora to know. Understanding our history in a fuller scope ultimately helps us in the long run. The Oyo Empire flourished around the mid-17th century to the mid-18th centuries. At the height of its power from 1650 to 1750, the Oyo Empire controlled the region between the Volta and Niger rivers, including Nupe, as well as the areas occupied by the Egba. Oyo was definitely the largest and the most powerful of the Yoruba states in West Africa. The empire was well organized with representatives of the Alafin, or ruler, called Ejele, being placed in tributary states. The Ejele themselves were also kept in check by royal messengers called Ilari. All the kingdoms or tributary states within Oyo adhered to the Ebi system of government. In this system, a kingdom was regarded as a version of the family, for lack of a better term. Leadership in Oyo was not based on military potential or economic prosperity, but seniority. Seniors who were more connected or closer in time with the original founders. Oyo wasn't really considered the most important or ancestral of the Yoruba kingdoms. It was simply the most powerful, and this is what makes Oyo interesting in my opinion, because its monarchy was constitutionally subject to the control of another Yoruba principality or kingdom known as Ele-Ife. Sometimes Oyo elites had to look over their shoulder to make sure that they aligned themselves with Ele-Ife. In many ways, Ele-Ife was a spiritual and moral authority. Understanding this dynamic helps in understanding the larger Oyo Empire as a whole. Oyo can be described to have four main phases. The first phase was a golden age of imperial conquest, which lasted about 1698 to 1750. The second phase was under the ruler Gaha, which started from 1750 to 1774. The third phase was under Abiodun, starting in 1774 and ending in 1789. And the last phase is the decline after the age of Abiodun. Abiodun, despite what happened, was still a ruler who can't be completely disregarded. His legacy can be considered complex, at least from a diasporic perspective. As mentioned before, the turning point in Oyo's history began with Basarun Gaha in 1750. Oyo elites were faced with a decision to continue expanding or focus on economic advancement. This crucial decision largely shaped the future of Oyo. Gaha made the decision to expand and conquer, but of course not everyone agreed, Abiodun being one of them. Some suggest that Oyo was actually weakened during this time, but Gaha was actually militarily strong. In 1764, an Asante contingent under their leader, Adankwa, entered Oyo with a force of around 20,000 men and was totally annihilated by Oyo according to the sources. This was just one example of Oyo's strength during this time, despite the quarrel among elites. However, Abiodun, a former trader, became wealthy from his entrepreneurial ventures, and so he wanted the empire to go in a very different direction. As Gaha became old, Abiodun wrested power away from the great conqueror king and became the Alafin by establishing relationships with rulers on the fringes of the empire and causing civil war. Though a usurper, the brief civil war was just that, brief, and did not cause the empire total ruin like previously believed. Under Abiadon, Oyo had peace and prosperity. Abiadon would seem to have been the most popular monarch that Oyo had had for the whole of the century. Oyo citizens regarded his reign as one of great blessings. They remembered that his period was peaceful, probably both in a sense that there were not many imperial wars and there were comparatively fewer insurrections in the capital. They also remembered that they were wealthy, measuring money in bushels and wearing the best of apparel. Ironically, however, the previous ruler's control of Dahomey was one of the greatest assets Abiadon had, as he totally disempowered the Oyo army. He commissioned the Dahomey army under Oyo generals to do the bidding of Oyo. Abiadon's success changed the very fabric of Oyo itself. It touched on the foundations of Oyo's power structure because before Abiadon, Oyo's real power was held amongst the military families. These military families, in a sense, throned and dethroned rulers. Abiadon's victory weakened the military families greatly because he acquired his power from elsewhere, and thus he did not have to fear being asked to commit suicide according to Oyo custom. This dismantling of the military family's power and the military itself had consequences, however. Oyo could not at all quell rebellions as they did before and had to rely on Dahomey nearly in totality, which obviously wasn't good. Another complexity was the economic growth of Oyo, which really wasn't a growth at all via hindsight. Abiadon inadvertently advanced the total depopulation of human resources in Oyo's history, which had dire consequences for us in the diaspora and even his own lineage in the future. Trade with Europeans was just an unequal exchange. Moreover, Abiadon's former profession perhaps blinded him to the bigger picture. Unfortunately, there were certain features in the slave trade economy which tended to make it absolutely ruinous for the exporting country. In a rural economy such as Oyo had, large numbers of virile people were needed for work in the fields since there were no machines or any mechanical devices. Any large-scale exportation of this class of citizens would tend to harm agriculture. Moreover, once the slave trade became established, it was absolutely impossible to keep it fair and to guarantee safety to peaceful citizens, for there was no foolproof means of preventing a strong man from seizing a weak one. That meant more social insecurity and yet another blow to peaceful agriculture or any other industry, which were in any case at a discount, since man-stealing and slave trading provided a much quicker source of wealth than any other form of profession. This perspective is a rather important one concerning Oyo in the 18th century. Abiadon's smart decision to focus on economic growth was only a bad decision due to the times they were in. Foresight into the ramifications of the slave trade was just not the focus of 18th century Yoruba elites. For any ruler, establishing an economic base is the true power of the state, but Oyo was doomed by its time and its decision to rely on the quick and easy money of human export. Perhaps the time in which Oyo existed may not have been an issue if they didn't participate in the latter. Anyway, Abiadon's own grandchild was the son of a freed enslaved Yoruba in Brazil. His name was Candido Francesco Galvo, and he became a Brazilian military officer and nobleman. So it just goes to show the ramifications of Abiadon's decision to shift the goals of Oyo. Again, for any empire in world history, shifting the focus from military expansion to economics is not a bad decision, and that's why the legacy of Abiadon can be considered a complex one for us in the diaspora. The legacy of Abiadon might be a case of a good mindset with unfortunate or bad execution. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.